which was taking place in Jordan. He was supposed to arrive in Sri Lanka on the 17th, and then thereafter this process or this agreement that was reached to bring about that 150,000 to 100,000 civilians safely across was to take place. But unfortunately that did not happen. In fact, when after we in principle agreed on the 16th at 8 o'clock, around about 10:30 I got frantic calls, because I had in fact notified the LTT that this process will take place on the following day, on the 17th, and I got frantic calls saying that despite the fact that I am supposed to have come to this agreement, that heavy artillery was being used arbitrarily and in a manner to maximize the loss of life. I got in touch with the Honorable Basil Rajapaksa again at about 10:30 in the night. And I told him, Honorable Sir, why are you doing this? Why is the Ministry of Defence doing this? We have already conveyed to you that tomorrow, if your government accepts, you can save nearly 100 to 150,000 civilians, something that you say you're all about. Why are you going on attacking those civilians with heavy artillery? But when the Honorable Basil Rajapaksa was told this, he said that he will speak to the Defence Ministry and get back to me. And when he got back to me, he said the Ministry of Defence's position is that until the Security Council meets on the 17th, that they cannot in any way change their strategy for attack. So what I am trying to tell here, Honourable Presiding Member, is the gravity of what happened. You might not agree, you might not want to believe this, but I am a witness and it is my duty to play it on record. The gravity of what happened on that 16th, and I being the witness to that, is that by 4 o'clock on the 16th of May 2009, the LTT had made it very clear through me that they were willing to lay down arms in order to save 150,000 to 100,000 people. But the Ministry of Defence refused to accept that position. They went on to use heavy artillery. The Honourable Sarath Fonseca, the last year during the Ministry of Defence, in fact, owned up to the fact that till the very end, heavy artillery was being used and attack formations were being maintained. So, when you have very clearly got proof, or you have at the very least been conveyed the fact that people are willing to lay down arms, and you refusing to accept that, using heavy artillery means only one thing: to maximize the loss of life. To maximize the loss of life so that you can destroy in whole or in part. That is the crime of genocide, Honourable Presiding Member, and that is the crime to which the Ministry of Defence, the Army, the Navy and the Air Force are accused of. Now, this is not an ordinary crime. It is the most heinous crime that you can ever come across. Isn't it a duty, when you talk today, that we must think in terms of Sri Lankan, to in fact allow an international investigation to find out whether in fact this crime took place or not? You get up, you stand up whenever we speak, and whenever we make this accusation, you stand up and you say that you have never committed any crime. Well, if you haven't committed any crime, what are you afraid of? Don't you realize that until accountability takes place, until victims feel that they can be safe, you will never have peace? Don't you realize that? You can never build a cohesive country. Why are you even now, 12 years, 13 years after the war, so afraid? If in fact genocide did not take place. If in fact genocide did not take place. The crime of genocide is not only killing. I said last year that when there were nearly 450,000 odd civilians in the LTT controlled areas before the war took place in a very aggressive way, the government's position was that there were only 70,000 civilians. There were only 70,000 civilians. They were sending medicine and food for only 70,000 civilians. Till the very end, that was all that they were doing. What does that mean? You're starving people, you're creating conditions to make sure that the life of whole or in part is lost. Please don't disturb me, Honourable Minister. You are speaking last.
Honourable
speak
member,
at the end.
Please don't
This is not a point.
Please don't misinform, right? We have rescued 295,000 people while fighting the war, right? Don't talk lies here. Don't misinform this August Assembly. Where were you at that time? You were at that time.
This is committee stage.
You are in Colombo, in luxury, when these people were suffering, and you know, we rescued. That was the world's largest rescue operation in the world, right? You must know that. So don't talk lies and don't misinform this.
Mike, he has 20 minutes at the end. He can speak. He can say whatever he wants, without disturbing me. But the problem is, you can't take it. If I am lying, why don't you sign the Rome Statute? Why don't you go before the ICC? Why don't you go and give evidence? You will be also an accused party. Why don't you go and give evidence? Why are you so frightened? Why are you even trying to prevent us from saying whatever we want in this house? Why are you frightened to even allow us to say whatever we want in this house? So this is the reality. This is the reality, Honourable Presiding Member, that we Tamil members face in this country. Today, 13 years after the war, your military, your armed forces maintains a ratio of 1 to 10 in the northeast. Why? 1 to 10. In the Vanni, it's 1 to 5. Why? What is the ratio in the south? What is the ratio in the south? You're terrorizing the people in the northeast even today. Why you are afraid? Even 12, 13 years after the war, you're afraid that evidence will go out. You're afraid of the fact that the Human Rights High Commissioner, in her last address to the High Commission, said that there is 120,000 files against Sri Lanka's military. That is what you're afraid of. You're afraid of the truth. And for as long as you run away from the truth, for as long as you safeguard genocideers, for as long as you think that genocide as a crime can get away, you will never create peace. You will always be insecure. You will always need to find partners who will in some way, regardless of what is right and wrong, support you in making sure that justice for genocide doesn't happen. And in the course of doing that, what you're doing is you're selling your country. You have sold the soul of this country day by day. That is what you're left with. In South Asia, Sri Lanka is asking for help from Bangladesh. Aren't you ashamed? You're asking for help from Bangladesh. This is what you have achieved 13 years after the war. 13 years after the war. If you don't realize that being Sri Lankan requires all its people to be loyal to that identity, and for that to happen, if you don't realize that all sections, all nations within this country must feel secure and safe, you will never create the Sri Lanka that you claim you stand for. On the contrary, you will make sure you go down the path of racism as you are doing now, to in some way divide the population.
You have 2 minutes.
To in some way divide the population as much as you can, create racist sentiments, polarization, so that through that polarization, you in some way maintain your vote bank. This is what is happening. But today, because of the severe situation that the general public are facing, for the first time, ordinary Sinhalese people are beginning to question what their leaders are saying. For the first time, ordinary Sinhalese people who maybe a few years ago would have dismissed what I say as racism, what my colleagues here say as racism, are willing to listen. For the first time, they are willing to question the lies that have been told them time and again. about what the Tamils want. You cannot sustain this path. If you sustain this path, what you're worried about the most about a division will not be brought by the Tamils, but by yourselves. Because it is the Sinhalese people themselves who will stand up one day and say, I am a person who venerates the Buddha, a man who has been so righteous, a man who preaches non-violence. But in my name, if these are the crimes that have taken place, then those people deserve the safety that they have been yearning for. That situation will arise if you don't change your path. And for God's sake, when you have ministers who don't know their role, the Honorable, I shouldn't say Honorable, Sarath Veerasekara is a minister who doesn't know what separation of powers is. It's a downright disgrace. He thinks as a minister who is in charge of policing that he can tell the police what to do. When my honorable colleague Selvaraja Gajendran went to Colonel Dilipan's resting place where he wanted to commemorate him, he wanted him arrested for it. He doesn't realize the country's own law. This is the man who's supposed to be the man in charge of policing. What a disgrace. And all he can do is try and be big in this house by disturbing me during my time when I speak. That is the very sad situation that this country finds itself in. That you have a person so intellectually challenged to be placed as a minister in charge of policing, where he shows repeatedly in this house the nature of his racism. The nature of his racism.
Honorable member, please wind up.
Only helps us to show internationally what sort of mindset with which
Honorable member, please
when he
wind up.
was in the Navy,
Please wind up.
he would have worked. So therefore, Honorable Presiding Member, once again I'm saying, the Tamil people are not enemies. But the Tamil people want their rights. They deserve their rights. They're fighting for the last 70-odd years for those rights.
Honorable
Those
member, please wind
rights
up.
will have to be met.
Please wind up, your time.
If Sri Lanka is to be stable, if Sri Lanka is to be a country that can live up to its potential, you cannot go down the path that you have gone in the last 74 years. As long as the Tamil people's nationhood is not recognized, and for as long as Sri Lanka doesn't recognize that it is a plurinational country, you will destroy this country, not just us, but yourselves as well. I'm repeating
Member,
every time, you will destroy yourselves as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.